Has socialism performed better than capitalism? Professor Jason Hickel says so, but his evidence is significantly flawed. A friend of mine sent me another Instagram post from Jason Hickel. You may recall Jason Hickel from one of my previous articles. Jason Edward Hickel, born 1982, is an anthropologist and professor at the Autonomous University of Barcelona. Hickel's research and writing focuses on economic anthropology and development, and is particularly opposed to capitalism, neocolonialism, as well as economic growth as a measure of human development. He is known for his books The Divide, A Brief Guide to Global Inequality and Its Solutions, 2017, and Less is More, How Degrowth Will Save the World, 2020. A critic of capitalism, he argues that degrowth is the solution to human impact on the environment. In his new Instagram post, Hickel states, "People often claim that capitalism performed better than socialism in terms of poverty and human development in the 20th century. This story is repeated so often that no one ever even bothers to back it up. Is it true? Obviously, Jason Hickel is implying that the statement is not true. He even provides evidence. His evidence is a research paper published in the American Journal of Public Health in 1986. For your reference, the article is titled Economic Development, Political Economic System, and the Physical Quality of Life and is authored by Shirley Ceresto, Ph.D., and Howard Waitkzin, M.D., Ph.D. What was the subject of the article? The abstract reads as follows. This study compared capitalist and socialist countries in measures of the physical quality of life, PQL, taking into account the level of economic development. The World Bank was the principal source of statistical data for 123 countries, 97% of the world's population. PQL variables included 1. Indicators of health, health services, and nutrition, infant mortality rate, child death rate, life expectancy, population per physician, population per nursing person, and daily per capita calorie supply. 2. Measures of education, adult literacy rate, enrollment in secondary education, and enrollment in higher education. And 3. A composite PQL index. Capitalist countries fell across the entire range of economic development, measured by gross national product per capita, while the socialist countries appeared at the low-income, lower middle income, and upper middle income levels. All PQL measures improved as economic development increased. In 28 of 30 comparisons between countries at similar levels of economic development, socialist countries showed more favorable PQL outcomes. I included the entire abstract just so no one can accuse me of taking parts of it out of context. The abstract states unequivocally that in 28 of 30 comparisons between countries at similar levels of economic development, socialist countries showed more favorable PQL outcomes. There you have it. Proof positive that socialist countries achieve better quality of life outcomes than capitalist countries. Therefore, according to Hickel, we should just throw this whole idea of capitalism into the dumpster of bad ideas that have been tested and failed. But is it proof? First, you might wonder what is PQL? PQL stands for the Physical Quality of Life Index. As Wikipedia states, it is an attempt to measure the quality of life or well-being of a country. That seems like a challenging thing to measure. How do you compare the life of a rancher in Montana to a financial executive in London, to a production line worker in China, to a sheep herder in Mongolia? And why even bother? Well, the reason researchers bother is because there was, and probably still is, some dissatisfaction with comparing countries based on gross national product, an economic measure. Without doing too much research, common sense dictates that people who are well off financially are not necessarily healthier or happier than people who are not so well off financially. The Buddhist monk may have a better quality of life than the jet-setting executive. One would expect, however, that those countries with higher national incomes could afford those things that add to the quality of life, such as healthcare, education, and longevity. And that is what the PQL attempts to do. Again, according to Wikipedia, the PQL is the average of 3 statistics: basic literacy rate, infant mortality, and life expectancy at age 1, all equally weighted on a 1 to 100 scale. You will also note that the PQL measurement required weighting. What does weighting mean? Let's say you compare life expectancy. Life expectancy in Singapore is 83.86 years. Life expectancy in India is 72.24 years. If you take the average of the two, 83.36 plus 72.24 divided by 2, you get 77.8 years. But to say the average life expectancy of India and Singapore is 77.8 years is misleading because Singapore has a population of 6 million people and India has a population of 1.4 billion people. Clearly, the real average life expectancy for India and Singapore must consider that there are 233 times more people in India than Singapore. This discussion of weighting is important because in Appendix A of the research paper we're discussing states that it did not use weighting, admitting if they did use weighting it would skew the results in favor of larger countries as opposed to small ones. So based on the study and its classification of countries, it would compare China, based on this study, a low-income communist country, to Haiti, a low-income capitalist country. Clearly comparing China to Haiti doesn't make much sense. One could also argue that if you want to measure quality of life, the three components of the PQL index don't measure up. While the PQL index considers literacy rate, infant mortality, and life expectancy, it doesn't include many factors that add to the quality of life, such freedom, liberty, choice, protection from government overreach, free speech, and so on. Think about it. Do you really think the people living in China in the 1980s under totalitarian rule, massive social engineering by the government, and widespread poverty had a better quality of life than people living in the United States or Canada at the same time? Another problem with this study is the classification of countries. Remember our man Hickel stated, "People often claim that capitalism performed better than socialism in terms of poverty and human development in the 20th century." This story is repeated so often that no one ever even bothers to back it up. Is it true? So how does the study classify countries? It divided countries between socialist countries and capitalist countries. On the socialist countries, as one would expect, are China, the USSR, and several Eastern European countries, Poland, Hungary, Romania. On the capitalist countries, the list includes the United States, Canada, and several Western European countries, France, West Germany, United Kingdom. However, included in the capitalist countries are Rwanda, Congo, Haiti, Yemen, Liberia, Ivory Coast, Sierra Leone, Mali, and numerous other countries. That is a major problem with this study. When we think of capitalist countries, we think of countries that have free markets, private ownership of industry and businesses, free elections, laws that protect citizens and businesses, and a reasonable amount of freedom and liberty. This study classifies Mexico as a capitalist country. Remember, the study was performed in the 1980s. In the 1980s, the Mexican government owned and ran Pemex, which controlled the exploration, production, refining, and distribution of oil products, CFE, the state-owned utility company that managed most of the electric power in the country, Telmex, which owned and operated most of the phone communications in the country, the railway system, a major stake in Aeromexico, the largest steel company in the country, most of the banks in the country, most of the mines in the country, most of the cement production in the country, most of the television channels, and even a major ownership of the company that distributed food staples. How can you say that Mexico was capitalist when the bulk of the major industries and businesses were owned and run by the government? To make matters even worse, the study classifies Rwanda, Congo, Haiti, Yemen, Liberia, Ivory Coast, Sierra Leone, and Mali as capitalist countries. These are countries with dictators, warring factions, lawlessness, turmoil, crooked elections, and major socioeconomic problems. Just because the government doesn't own the businesses, it doesn't mean these countries have the legal and political system needed for capitalism to really work its magic. In fact, these countries do not have the needed political and legal infrastructure for capitalism to work effectively, so they are not representative of countries in which capitalism works. I have now identified three major reasons why this study is flawed. 1. It does not properly classify countries that practice capitalism versus socialism. 2. It does not properly weight the populations of the countries in the study. If you did, you would primarily be comparing China to the United States. And 3. The Physical Quality of Life Index only includes a few variables and does not take into account many factors such as freedom, liberty, the rule of law, and choice that certainly are important in measuring quality of life. Going back to Hickel, Hickel represents that this study somehow proves that socialism has achieved better results than capitalism. The study clearly does not, and as I have pointed out, the study has numerous flaws. Hickel is a university professor, researcher, and author. You would expect him to have done the same analysis that I have done. The conclusion must be that Hickel used this study to make his point without even reading it, or worse, did read it and ignored its flaws to support his continued attack on capitalism. Either way, it is very disappointing and certainly reason to discount or disregard his opinions. Even worse, as a professor, he is spouting his falsehood the next generation of business and world leaders. I'll finish by quoting Milton Friedman, so that the record of history is absolutely crystal clear that there is no alternative way so far discovered of improving the lot of the ordinary people that can hold a candle to the productive activities that are unleashed by the free enterprise system. If your friends and colleagues send you memes and posts from Hickel, don't even bother looking at them.